Unresponsibly sourced. That's what I want to do. These are responsibly sourced. Your turn. Now you know the rule if you're in charge of 4 hours. 2 words. No. Well, it doesn't matter how it's done. It doesn't matter how it's done. In any endeavor in music technology, if food arrives, it leaves in sung or just in format, but it doesn't leave just like I'm taking it. It's wholly unacceptable. There's another entire series of experiences that include no leftovers and no prisoners, but that's a whole different. No prisoners, but it's a whole different thing. It's fun. My favorite kind. My favorite kind. Alrighty, let me check. Judges are what position? We do. It's actually very cool. They have rotating exhibits on the first floor. There's, I mean, it really is cool. It's very cool. It's a happy place. And there's some old presses like I just love. My sister's really into typography, and so she keeps buying these half-ton, 6,000 presses. And they've got these universal stores, so that's great. But she didn't know how to fix it. So it's like, you know, and I'm looking at this like, if it takes me half a day to become, how does it actually work? And then trying to figure out what's wrong. And then of course there's parts. And then some parts. Cool, I'll fix your presses. Here's the lane. Because I am not run around the radio Los Angeles. It's fine. Especially
introduce Yi, who's for the contestants. He will be the timekeeper, so every now and then he will do 5, 3, 2, 1. So play the Yi. Let's someone okay. And let's start with N by example.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Silveira, and let's put this mic before. My name is Gustavo Silveira, and I'm from Brazil, and today I'm gonna talk about the XT Synth, this guy here. So the XT Synth is an interface that allows string players to make electronic music without having to learn a new skill set. So it can play any sound in a computer, like it's a MIDI controller, and although it's a string instrument, it doesn't actually have physical strings like a guitar or a violin, but it has sensors that allow the player to play continuous pitch like you were doing in a string instrument. And because it has like virtual strings, it can be tuned to whatever tuning. So if you play the guitar, you can tune like a guitar or a violin or to whatever you want. So I play the guitar and I play a little bit of the violin and I play a little bit of the keyboard. And I always got a little bit frustrated making electronic music because I never could play a synthesizer, which I love, like I play a guitar. And I thought that like maybe I could build something that could get the best from like what I think like the guitar, like the violin, and a MIDI controller. So the guitar for me, like it's my main instrument. It's like easy to play. Like I know the scales, like my fingers just go there and play. It's my main instrument. Like the violin, I really love the idea, like doing the vibrato and glissandos. And like MIDI controller, you can do whatever you want. You can control like thousands of sounds. So I try to do something that like it's easy to play, like a guitar, it's easy to tune, but you can do microtonal stuff like the violin and vibratos and glissandos. But you also have the ability to control anything in a computer. So, for example, if you are, you can do. So you can do like that, like a violin, but it has a system, a tuning system that actually quantizes the notes. So it's actually easy to play in tune, but it also allows you to do all the vibrato and glissandos. So in this part here, it has a couple of sensors. It's more like towards the MIDI controller part, like for you to control whatever you want. So it has 4 encoders that actually you can map to whatever you want in a DAW. It has a LED feedback, so you actually know where you are. So it like goes from blue to red, and you can actually use the buttons to change the octave, and you also have different banks that you can access with the encoder bank, those buttons. So you have 4 encoders, but you have like I guess 8 banks, so you can have like 4 times 8 different mappings for the encoders. You have normal potentiometers to map to whatever you want. And you have pressure sensors that you can use to control different things. And you can do like 4 at the same time. And you can also use the pressure sensors to play like you play a string. And it has a 3D printed body, top layer acrylic, and I kind of made this design because like me as a guitar player, like most of the guitar players, you don't choose an instrument just because the way it sounds. It's like the aesthetics matter, and like make an instrument that has a certain personality, right? Like if you play a guitar, if you play a flying V, like it implies something, like if you play a Les Paul or a Telecaster, right? So I wanted to make a MIDI controller that also has this kind of guitar feel that like you play an instrument and you bring to stage and kind of look yours. So that's about it, about the description about the instrument. I'm gonna perform.
What were you MIDIing to? Were you MIDIing to something?
Yeah, to Ableton Live.
Okay, and the sounds were?
I'm using mostly native massive
Okay.
for the synths,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple effects on live.
Mm-hmm. Nice. How did you choose the size to make the instrument? It's small for a guitar. It's maybe like a mandolin size almost. Yeah.
So I had worked also with some restrictions, or like sensors that I had too. Also, I'm working with like right now like plastic, so I'm not comfortable enough making a long neck. That's gonna be like strong enough. So I tried to do this first version, this size, but it can be really can just change the neck and connect a bigger neck with big sensors to the main PCB.
Is it 4-finger?
Yeah.
Yes.
4 strings.
4 strings, yes.
How do you feel, the difference? You are a mandolin player, right?
I play the mandolin.
Yeah. What's the difference when you can't hit the strings? Have you thought about that? Now you just use your left hand, right?
So if I need to hit the strings,
You don't. Yeah. How do you trigger? You trigger only with your left hand.
I
right?
can trigger just with the left hand.
You don't miss this.
Or you can do here and
Oh, there you have it here as well.
so I have this switch here that can switch between triggering here or triggering here and using this as control change.
Is everything except for the MIDI that's going out in the box, the LED lighting, colors, everything? So
Yeah.
nothing's coming back from the computer.
No,
So
you
it's
can
all-
plug through like with a USB to any software, anything.
Right.
You don't need anything extra. It's MIDI class compliant. Just plug and play.
Hmm. 'Cause, 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 'cause,
we good? What?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
TABLIX is next.
Thank you. Give me one sec. It's not always easy to work with. That being said, it's an honor and pleasure to be here with all of you and amongst you this afternoon to share what's been brewing in my lab, both technologically and creatively. I'd like to introduce you to TABLIX. TABLIX is my humble attempt at integrating the tabla into the digital world by collaborating with modern-day music production technology, software, and hardware. The first piece that you just heard right now is called Nagma Ishq, which loosely translated means for the love of the melody. And Nagma Ishq is a revisit and reinterpretation of what an Indian classical tabla solo could look like through the lens of TABLIX. And believe it or not, everything that you heard, the melody and the rhythm was created through this integration of the tabla into the digital world, aside from the drone, which was underlying the entire composition. Just by a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the tabla? Okay, quite a few of you, but some who are not. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the tabla, because without the tabla, there would be no TABLIX, and without the tabla, I wouldn't be here. So a few minutes just to kind of give you a background of the instrument itself. So usually, there's no wires attached to it or coming out of it. The tabla is comprised of a bass or a duggi, and a treble known as the pora. And together they are known as the tabla. The tabla is also known as a melodic percussion instrument, and the reason for that is that when you are playing the tabla, the goal is to tune it to the root note or the tonic of whoever you're accompanying. And both that is both true for the duggi and the pora. So for example, this one is tuned to C, and each pora has a range of about 3 tones that it can tune to, and a natural frequency at which it sits the best. So sometimes, if you are accompanying a musician, you need to bring more than 1, sometimes up to 2, sometimes even 3, and even more depending on how many notes that you might need to shift between when accompanying somebody else. Tabla is also known as a talking drum, and there are a couple of reasons for that. The idea behind it is that the pora is having a conversation with the duggi, or the bass, and together they're hopefully having a conversation with the performer and the audience who's listening. The other reason the tabla is known as a talking drum is that there is an entire language associated with it. Sounds a lot like beatboxing for the sounds a lot like beatboxing, but beatboxing for the tabla. For example, da 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 din din da da din din da tit dagina da da tit dagina da da tit dagina da da. So you may ask, well, why TABLIX? And there were a few reasons for this. One was I noticed that every form of communication, be it was going in the digital realm, whether it was email, whether it was texting, whether it was leaving voice notes, you name it, everything was going digital. However, the way that I enjoyed communicating the most, which was most authentic, most emotional, and most truthful for me, which was through the tabla, was not going digital. So I wanted to explore what would it look like to communicate in the digital world through the lens of the tabla. The second reason stemmed from a creative desire and a goal, which was to digitally pitch shift, because sometimes I would be taking up to 10 or 12 of these into a gig. Imagine collaborating with a DJ where the song changes every 4 to 5 minutes. I would listen to the tonic, have these pre-tuned, and switch the tabla in either to the tonic or the harmonic as needed. But being in a club environment or a festival environment, you were limited to space, so that was one issue. The temperature in the room was always shifting, so they didn't hold their root note or the tonic. And then logistics, traveling with 10 or 12 or even 5 or 6 tablas was very challenging. Baggage fees are getting more and more ridiculous, so it became very expensive as well. So TABLIX came about from wanting to, one, just communicate in the digital world, but the first project I gave myself was to be able to digitally pitch shift in that world. So now I can travel with one set of tablas, not require a mic, but have that tabla, the borda, connected to a pickup, which goes through the audio interface into Ableton Live, and my doogie, which has an internal mic that also goes through the interface into Ableton Live. And now at the press of a button, I can be in whatever key I'd like to. So if I wanted to be very low, or a little bit higher, or higher still. So essentially, I can choose to be in whatever note in real time at the press of a button. I can also use the tabla as a melodic tool, and for the instance that you saw in Nagma Ishq, I pre-compose the melody, or I can have somebody play real time. And most importantly, I wanted to integrate in the digital world through the tabla in a way that stayed true to the ergonomics and the tradition and the art form of playing the tabla. Because when I was looking around to communicate in this space, though there were other instruments and devices around, be it the Korg wave drum or the Roland Hand Sonic and others, and though they had great tabla samples and sounds on it, they fell apart when I went to play them as a tabla player. And it was the same tabla skill and skill set that allowed me to adapt to play those instruments. However, when I wanted to communicate as a tabla player, it wasn't possible at all. So that's what led me down this path of creating TABLIX. I'd like to do one small piece for you and then open the floor to some questions.
just have a question.
Yeah.
Do you? I could notice a slightly latency.
Yes.
Well, what's your thought about that?
I can't really explain it. There is a slight latency. One of the reasons, what I do to compensate for that is I in-ear monitor. They're noise canceling in-ear monitors, and I don't know if there's a shift that's happening either in my brain or it's negligible when I'm playing, so I don't perceive it. But when I hear through monitors or loudspeaker, then I'm like, oh, there is a latency there. Also, when I'm collaborating with other musicians, I bring them into my environment and create my own in-ear mix, and then I don't play behind or with any latency.
That was exactly going to be my question. It seemed to me that when you were doing the isolated tones to demonstrate the pitch shift, it was really clear. There's a quarter second of latency in there. And some of that you could probably fiddle around with buffer sizes in Ableton and help with. But when you were playing this rhythmically, I was really looking closely, and it seemed like it wasn't there, but I'm sure it was. So that's pretty cool. Given the rhythmic constraints of tabla playing, I would think that would make you nuts. But I mean, it is known that pipe organists get used to a fixed latency of up to half a second between them and the pipes, as long as it's fixed. And so you can get used to playing and articulating, knowing that you have to lead by that much. So you must be doing that.
There must be something going on. I can't explain it. I actually thought I had solved the problem.
Yes,
and then I invited some friends over to collaborate, and they were like, hey man, it's latent. I was like, no, it's not. Look, I wouldn't be able to play if it was. But then that's when it occurred to me, and occurred to them. They were like, oh, you might actually be playing somehow compensating it for. Yeah. And I can't explain it.
You may want to go into Ableton, use the smallest buffer size possible, and play with different pitch shifting plugins to see, because FFT-based pitch shifting, sometimes they use 3 buffers to actually get you to where you need to be. Okay. And so some of that can be mediated, I think, but it's awesome anyway.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I started configuring auto-tune and other software to see if that would work, but there was a lot of CPU usage, and the latency was huge. Yeah. So now where it stands is there's a 3-part Max plugin which has been developed that is listening real time, but yeah, there's a lot more tweaking that could be done, I think. Yeah. Which I'll have to try.
Yeah, you can maybe find a DSP hacker to write you something special in Max and set those buffers down really small and hope for something better, but.
So how many actual pickups do you have in those?
I just have one pickup on the treble, on the porta.
Oh.
And I have one internal mic on the bass, on the doogie.
Because you were getting some, distinctions, like when you were doing the repeated notes, or, sometimes it was just advancing the sequence, it seemed, but sometimes it was...
Oh, that actually sequence, that melody was being created all by the tabla. So what's happening is that real-time tabla playing audio is getting married to a MIDI composition. So that MIDI data could be anything. Even like on the keyboard here, actually.
We have maybe 20 seconds.
20 seconds? All right.
Whoa!
Sorry.
You have 30 seconds. Yeah.
So press any key on there, and while I'm at the tabla.
Okay.
Then,
God, I love iPads so much.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
He's going to play, and you're going to play too.
All right. Let me know when you're.
I'm ready.
And rhythmically, I can play whatever to you.
Thank you. the cable. Watch out. You guys switch it to his computer, and then once he says I'm about to perform, then you switch it to what you have on. All right. Is it on? Laptop input? Laptop input. It's not on. It's not the laptop input. It's showing a live feed. You need to give this. All right, I'm ready. My name is Matt Steinke, and I'm presenting the stepper rattle instrument. But I wanted to give a little bit of context before I started. I'm a sculptor, experimental musician, sound artist, new media artist, I guess you could say. And I've been composing and building robotic instruments for about 20 years. I've made some solenoid-actuated harmoniums, hurdy-gurdy, glockenspiels, loud mechanical percussion. And all of these instruments are MIDI triggered. And I was interested in MIDI after working with synthesizers, but I never really, I was never very interested in the sounds coming from software, so I started to explore acoustic sounds, but controlling them with electronics and MIDI specifically. But I also started to feel like I wanted to try an instrument that was off the grid, that was not on the MIDI grid, and sort of played by its own set of rules. And at the same time, I was experimenting with different kinds of actuators to actuate robotic percussion that didn't have a clicking sound. So I don't know if some of you, I'm sure a lot of you here, know that with robotic percussion, when you use solenoids, which are basically electromagnets with plungers, they make a clicking sound. And for percussion instruments that have high end, usually it just blends in with something like a snare or or cluckers or something like that. But if you're working with instruments that are hitting like membranes and you want kind of a nice thump, it can be problematic because it's cute for a while, but it's still that clicking sound. And you just don't like it. So I actually solved that problem with voice coil actuators. But in the process, I was experimenting with stepper motors. And what I discovered was that stepper motors were not the right decision because they actually had this tone that they produced alongside the movement and the actuation that they produced. But being the noise musician that I am, I found that to be very interesting. And so I decided to create an instrument that specifically exploits that. So I designed the stepper rattle. I'll move around here. So this instrument also is its own theater, and it's pretty much responsible for the visuals and the sound coming from the venue. So in the space, I can perform it all as one performance. And I wanted to do that because I liked that idea of having an instrument that was fully responsible for the performance, and it was all in this one particular space that I could walk around with and manipulate. There is a pickup on the actual stepper motor, a contact mic, And there's a contact mic on the soundboard that the stepper beat or mallet hits. And that's amplified. And then as well, this is the controller, which is a microcontroller. And it controls the tempo, which is basically from 180 degrees to the a 180-degree rotation, and then less. So the further, it's like 90, 30, and that's how you control the tempo. It's pretty much works with the speed of the stepper motor itself. I actually have it set to go to a little bit higher than that, like around 250, because it makes this interesting roll sound when it comes back this way. There's also a sensor that tells the software to switch direction, so when it hits, it comes back up. And then I have one potentiometer that I use to control the tempo, like that. And then I have one that controls the pitch to the stepper motor. And one of the interesting things about stepper motors is they like to respond at a particular frequency. And when you move out of that frequency range, whether you're going to higher than what it likes or lower than what it likes, it starts to behave in some interesting ways. And I also felt like that was a fun thing to play with as a musician, to be able to kind of play the instrument's behavior, sort of like you would maybe perform with a drum machine or a sequencer. You're playing with something that's autonomous, and it's behaving a certain way, and you're controlling those parameters. In this case, it's a little bit more improvisational, I guess you could say. So the stepper motors, sort of the nature of these stepper motors is to behave in these very interesting sort of ways where you can get tones from the actual coils, and then obviously with this instrument it's making percussive sounds on the soundboard. I think that's all I wanted to say about it. Yeah, so I'm going to take this off and I'm going to perform.
this is the future. Is the camera part of the instrument? Because I really love the...
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a theater, like an experience all unto itself. Yeah.
Well, it was a real palate cleanser, you know? It was just like, it left me purified and ready for, you know, anything. But what was, okay, so by intervening in the motion, by throwing objects in the way, such as that paper, or is that also for the filmic quality?
Both. It blocks the IR sensor, so it causes it to actually behave more erratically when I put it.
Yes,
But then
I got it.
It also, then it also, it adds rattle,
Yeah,
like a snare.
yeah, cool, okay. So you use a slinky and you use paper?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes I'll find objects at the venue that I'm at just so people can see it and relate to it. And find, oh, that's the acorns from outside.
okay, cool.
I have no questions on the design. I can picture a movie of you performing this for a big room full of industrial robots who are all very excited about
Yeah,
this.
it's funny you should say that because I really was interested in that idea of how can you give voice to a machine and what kind of music does it want to play aside from, in a lot of robotic music you're trying to make it a superhuman performance or you're trying to make it some kind of, you want it to empathize. But what if it doesn't? What if it does its thing and you have to manage it or try to manage it? And what kind of music comes about? And it actually, there's some things about it, depending on the lighting, it will behave differently, slightly.
Is it like a glass?
Acrylic.
So you acrylic. So you see what happens if you...
Yeah, so you can actually kind of see some.
Or is it like protection?
The what?
Is it protection?
This thing, it's to kind of, it's so I can put things on it and then I can move it and shake it off, partly, and to hold the stepper. Yeah, and also
what controls do you have behind the glass?
Oh yeah, so there's tempo right here, which is, like I said, the tempo of the range of the beater, which becomes the tempo. And then I have pitch shift right here. And up in the high frequency range, you're only getting squeals, basically high frequencies from the coils. And in the very low frequency range, it causes the coils to, or the stepper to kind of act a little bit more jittery. And then right around the middle, you kind of, right at about 10 o'clock-ish, it starts to try to behave more normally. And then when I click it into drone mode up here, oops, right there, then it maintains a set frequency, and only the tempo works. So I can kind of, it's almost like blues. You can kind of move in and out of the tonic, which is basically that mode.
Okay. Can you mix the sound also from the stepper motor sound?
Yeah. So I have.
Because when I looked at it before you start playing, I was expecting, okay, this is a kick drum thing, but I didn't.
Yeah. So it has a blend pot for the actual soundboard, and then one for the actual.
On that topic, I get a strong sense that some of the sound getting into the microphone cable is RF.
Yes.
Not acoustic sound.
It's a blend.
Okay.
It's a blend. Yeah, I had to. I actually included that because
Okay.
I knew that was going to be inevitable.
Inedible.
And
Yes.
going with that idea that the machine is speaking.
Yeah.
I just let it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then it has one more switch, which is kind of extra. It's random octave, momentary when you push up, and then it's random frequency when you push down.
So it's completely self-contained, and the sound is all acoustic?
It's acoustic electric, like an electric guitar.
Yeah.
And that
what's
way.
your sound chip? What are you using to generate the sound?
A Pro Mini, Arduino Pro Mini.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually not generating the sound. The 3D printer chip, driver chip, is actually producing the tones, and I'm talking to it with the Pro Mini.
Okay. Cool.
I guess I should have explained how a stepper motor works, but it basically
Yeah, it's new. It's new to me.
it's
Yeah.
an interesting motor that produces tones and actuations. If you ever watch a 3D printer, it'll hypnotize you.
Yes. Yes.
Can you have like pre-programmed patterns also in that?
I did that, yeah. I tried that. But for this instrument, I really just wanted it to be very improvisational and free. But I controlled it with MIDI, and yeah, I did that. So yeah.
But this is your non-MIDI.
This is
instrument.
off the grid.
Off the grid, yeah. Cool.
So it's only audio out and power, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Right now, everyone is welcome to go and try something. What?
Side. Just imaging. Trying to do it like this.
It always makes me so sleepy in this dark room the whole day. Right.
Yeah, I do miss Klaus.
Klaus was a nice atmosphere.
Moving into the side room.
So where did you say we
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. The machine speaking for itself.
we're dead, we're dead. We won't see you later. Let's forget what we heard. Beautiful people in a terrible world. I'm fine with that. When we die, we die.
Dying dog, placed it at the foot of the bed. Clean your teeth, the iron seeps through the cloth. Empty eyes, start again. I loved you, money made no mistake. Badly, I loved you, just it starts. Cut the jaw. Pray to God, I'm moving on. Cast away the God for you. Hand shaking hands, made your face and left. Loved you, dirty mouths, 666, draped across the whole floor. No one moved in to the house where we used to live. Getting off on silky smooth, modern takes on age. These heady highs will never leave you alone. Loved you, I loved you. I loved you. Badly, I loved you. There's no one waiting up for you. Stay here forever. Treat yourself to someone new. Dance like you got it all figured out. Let's go down our road together. Play it cool. Always know you are loved, you are loved.
like you got it all figured out. Flowers rise like gowns of polyester. We are human beings. Always know you are love. You are love. Gowns of polyester. There's no one waiting out for you. Stay out here forever. Further treat yourself to someone new. Dance like you got it all figured out. Gowns of polyester. There's no one waiting out for you. Stay out here forever. Further treat yourself to someone new. Dance like you got it all figured out. Heavy highs start again. Money made, money spent. Feel the weight. The golden age as it starts. Cut the jaw off a dying dog. Placed it at the foot of the bed. Clean your teeth. See iron seeps through the cloth. Heavy highs start again. Loved you. Money made, money spent. Badly, I loved you. As it starts. Cut the jaw. Pray to God. I'm moving on. something in the air that summer night. It covered our heads. Standing there with your hair washed in fluorescent lights. Another world lies between us. We stood there on the corner. No one else had been there as we said our goodbye. Maybe things would have changed. I wish you well, I wish you well. I wish you well, I wish you well. Something in the air that summer night that I hung the world around your neck. Hair tucked behind your ear like reflecting headlights. There were ripples in time. Something in the air that summer night. It covered our heads. For a moment it was there, the night you said, I'll see you again. I wish you well, I wish you well. I wish you well, I wish you well.
My musical instrument is a deer calling. I made a musical instrument out of deer antler. So last year, I was making this musical instrument because I have been an artist in residence program with the Nakanojo Art Biennale at Gunma Prefecture in Japan. Gunma Prefecture is 2 hours from Tokyo by train, but there are rural areas, wooden old house and hot spring. When I was researching about Gunma Prefecture, my friend introduced me a Japanese local hunter. So a Japanese local hunter who gave me this deer antler. As you know, in rural area of Japan, there are beautiful locations such as mountain, forest, and river. Also, wild animals are living there. Especially, the most famous wild animal is deer. Actually, deer are damaging our agriculture in rural area, but deer is often compared to the god of nature in Japan. So this is a difficult problem because we can compare deer to the god of nature, but the other side, we can kill deer by hunting. If I use deer antler as material for musical instrument, I think it is generating sound for the god of nature. So this is handmade musical instrument. There is a set of steel strings on deer antler. The vertical playing style is similar to the cello. Also, this has simple electric guitar system. It's a magnetic pickup microphone gain volume, tone volume, and output connector to send signal to amplifier. And you can adjust string tuning with machine heads at the bottom of body. So we have examples of musical instruments made out of animal materials all over the world. Here I want to show you Japanese traditional musical instruments. The taiko drumhead is made by cow skin. Japanese three strings is called the shamisen, is covered by cat skin. And the big shell, how can I explain? In Japanese, horagai. Horagai is modified for use as a trumpet. Perhaps you may know some other examples. So I think using animal materials for musical instruments, that feels a good relationship with nature and human life. It does not change from the primitive age. This is attempt to produce the voice of dead animal. So I want to produce the voice of dead animal for the God of nature as music. So thanks. So I want to show my performance. Have any question or comments? So I can do easy English. He helped me. Thank you.
So the strings on the antlers, those are decoupled from the strings on the fretboard, or on the neck. Yes.
Different.
They're different. They're tuned different. They're not subject to the tension in the other strings. Right. Yeah.
Also, you're asking if this string is the same as the.
Is the tension, if I twist this machine head, does it cause one of the antler strings to change pitch?
Yes.
It does. Okay. So everybody's coupled together. Interesting.
You use a lot of reverberation, flanging, effects. What does it sound like? I wasn't sure if what I was hearing was, primarily the result of are the effects built into the machine, or the effects like the reverb, flanging?
I was using the delay and reverb.
Yes.
And modulation.
Guitar pedal.
Oh, and the guitar
Yes.
pedal. Okay. Okay. Do you play normal cello as well? Do you play cello?
Play cello?
Traditional cello?
I never cello.
No.
Played cello. This is the first time.
First time.
Using bow.
Only the deer cello. It's a very beautiful instrument.
Thank you.
Beautiful design. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Lovely.
I like very nice design, and also like the whole performance. It feels like one piece: the instrument, your performance, the music. It's like you have one thought in your head, and the music tells the same thing as the instrument, and yeah, I like that. Organic. Holistic, maybe, yeah.
So, okay. Do you have any question? So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next is the alto.glove. Can you move your chair?
sort of explain what's going on. This is what I call the alto glove, and there are data gloves, of course. People have been making gloves for a while. Letitia Tsunami made the ladies' glove 20 years ago. It's a great glove. But nobody has really... Oh, should I grab this? Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, sure. I'm multitasking. Brain is misfunctioning. Okay. Maybe Keynote's not going to show up. In which case, I will simply speak ad hoc. Keynote does not want to open up. Okay, whatever. I'll just talk about the glove. Okay, so I was starting to say that there are data gloves that have existed, and people have used data gloves to do things with sound and music. And they've been around for a very long time. The Nintendo Power Glove was around in like 1986. Letitia Tsunami had this, what she calls the ladies' glove, it's been around for 20 years. Imogen Heap has this Mimu glove. And there have been plenty of so-called augmented violin projects as well at institutes like EarCam and places where people do really intense music research, because the violin has always been of serious interest because it allows this sort of extreme nuance. You have this what we call a continuous friction controller. You're moving the bow across the strings, and you have these really subtle movements, like really just subtle changes in articulations that can be continuously changed. They create this really rich field. It's like long historical sort of, I guess, I don't want to say pedigree, but it's accumulated into an enormous amount of technique, and it's really refined. So I've looked at some of the projects that people have done work for augmented violin, and I thought that I needed to do something a little differently than what they had done. So for instance, in most data gloves, the first 3 fingers are considered to be most important, because these 2 are kind of connected and nobody cares about the pinky. There's like whatever. So if you pick 3 fingers to use on your data glove for measuring their position, pick these 3. But when it comes to the bow, the 4th finger, the pinky, that is, tells you the continuous horizontal pivoting of the bow in the hand, and use it to balance the stick when you're close to the bridge. And so this is like a really important finger. There's a bend sensor on the wrist, which is essentially a proxy for the distance of the frog of the bow from the bridge, so I can kind of tell where I'm playing. There's a motion sensor inside here with a gyroscope and an accelerometer, and it's positioned in such a way that the z-axis of the gyroscope tells me changes in bowing direction quite accurately, and that segments, that is this process of gesture segmentation very clearly across the zero point of the axis, and it tells me if I'm doing an up or a down bow. The x-axis, this rotation, tells me if I'm doing string crossings. So I really thought about these things and tried to put together a glove that would really speak to the sort of affordances and the specific language of using the bow. And then I also added a couple things which I think are exciting, and that's that I realized that I could hold the bow like this, and with only a partial release of the bow, I started to think, like, well, what could I do? Like, what could I trigger if I was holding the bow like this, which is how you hold the bow. Well, I can pick it up and do something like this. And so there's a pressure sensor right here, so I can it's called an FSR, a force sensitive resistor. But in this case, I'm using it as a trigger to sort of make things happen that kind of push me on in the music to keep going. I press it, and this kind of polyphonic pulsar synthesis thing I made starts to happen. And there's also a button here, which is a little bit harder to trigger. But in both cases, I can continue to hold the bow and just make a very minor switch here, and it's pretty subtle and make things happen. And that's really important. I've played with foot pedals and things and other dials and stuff, and this doesn't disconnect me from the instrument. It doesn't make my brain go, oh, pause, disconnect. It's like right there, so I can do it, and it's fluid, and it's part of what I do now. So 2 force-sensitive resistors here, motion sensors, and then what I call a poetic computation scheme. Please, if I'm at some point I'm going to like run over. I'm going to talk too long, so you have to just tell me to stop talking. But here's the thing about the so-called poetic computation scheme. Most of the time in the NIME literature, in this interest in bowing and the scientific interest in bowing, has been sort of given to the tasks of machine learning to classify these sort of canonical types of bowing. The détaché, the martelé, the spiccato, things like this. And that's how a lot of these projects have proceeded. Are we successful with our machine learning KNN nearest neighbor classification algorithm to say like, oh, you're doing a détaché bow right now, or you're doing spiccato or ricochet, you're doing these things. And they're never accurate, and they have to be done on a performer by performer basis. And if you have your the pinky down versus having it up when you're playing, this causes perturbations in the right arm. So it's almost you can keep trying to get this data, this classification data, but even if you do get it right, as a performer, I find it kind of boring to be like, oh, I gotta try to do date haché now, or I gotta try to do this kind of bowing or that bowing. So I created a scheme that basically, for months, or for a year now, I've looked at all kinds of different ways of processing the data that's coming in from this motion chip. Looking at accumulations of gyroscopic data, adding them up, averaging them, sending them after bow changes, and then looking at this visually, and then using this to map to certain sonic parameters. So it's poetic in this sort of strict sense that I haven't set my goals out at the beginning for what I want to do. I want to see trends in this data, I want to see visual trends, that I can say, oh, it would be interesting if this happened, if this effect was correlated to this thing. So it's this kind of poesis, this revealing. And this is a sort of alternative paradigm of truth. It's not truth as correctness, it's truth as this kind of progressive unfolding or revealing, something that's happening and you're aware of it, and I think of it as a kind of poetry. So the effects that I've done here, that's obviously a huge part of it. This thing right here is just a piece of hardware, but it has a software substrate. And the software substrate belongs to it just as much as the hardware. And so I've thought a lot about what kind of processes would be interesting to improvise with a violin and have them go through. What would you want? What do you want to have happen? What would inspire you to keep playing? So I've spent a lot of time developing my own sort of sound processing, which taxes my computer heavily and is having problems right now. I have to individually compile these applications because Macs can't run multiple copies, and multi-threading is a nightmare. Anyway, that's what I'm dealing with. I'll say one last thing. What I'd like to do with this is, now that Ableton Live 10 is out, I think I want to move all this stuff back into Macs for Live patches and somehow distribute it, get it out to people so they could use it instead of having them compiled as these Macs MSP applications that are communicating through OSC, and it's a big headache. So the multi-channel stuff, and this is multi-channel. It's usually 8 channels, but 2 is good as well. So anyway, that's where I'd like to go with it now. I'd like to actually disseminate this and have some string players, get a glove or something akin to this and have fun with it and see how their playing changes. So that's absolutely. Yes, please. There's a question in the back there, yeah. Hi. Oh, okay. Oh, that's the 1 minute mark. Oh.
I have a question. You told about you had a software part of it as well, right?
Yes.
How does that work? Do you have a graphical representation when you move your arms? You can see the curves, or how is this poetic?
So there are 3 applications. One of them it just calculates information from the glove in myriad ways. And I've created this huge panel where I visualize it. And I put the scheduler on that one on overdrive, and it's in its own world. And then it sends OSC data to 2 other applications that have all the sound stuff going on. So it's basically me sort of meditating on this visual aspect of it and looking at it and thinking about it and experimenting and just all day long. So, yeah.
I kind of like how you described it, that you want something to drive, something that does push you to move on in the music. I kind of like that idea. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, if you do classification, you're always aiming for something that you've already got. You know the categories, and they've been divided up a priori, and now you're going to throw things into them. And I didn't want to draw those boundaries beforehand. I started out doing that like that, and I found it very disappointing. Marie Kamura is this famous violinist she has also written about this. It's not that exciting to do classification. So I need the data in different ways, and then visualize it. And then I look at that.
Do you add some randomness to it as well, or?
No randomness, but I would say there is a post-digital ethos here, like a sort of pseudo-randomness. For instance, I'll use pitch tracking. Pitch tracking with string instruments is a nightmare, but the data it shoots out, the kind of pitch it thinks it's got, is pseudo-random. It's kind of close, but not quite, and I like to exploit that. Use whatever I can instead of trying to get it, right, I think. Yes.
Were you triggering samples in part of this? Were you triggering? There were some, odd sounds that kept reappearing.
Everything was, I'm not sure, were both of the monitors on out here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one of mine was off, so I wasn't sure if something was going on. So there is one big synthesis process in there that's not from real-time processing of the violin sound.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is real-time violin
Oh, okay.
processing. The one thing is this polyphonic pulsar engine I built. It's like 50 voices of pulsar, and it sounds like grinding electricity, and it kind of randomly chooses between them. But that's the only synthesis element.
Okay.
There might be it's mostly real-time violin sampling, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Right, we'll have some more time later.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I thought I didn't. Okay, my bad. Thank you so much.
We'll have time. And the last instrument for today is Stahlcello.
Yeah, now it's on. So, first of all, thank you for this invitation and for organizing this nice meeting here. My name is Jan Heinke, and I brought the Stahlcello, which translates to steel cello, obviously. And yeah, why it's called a steel cello? Its range compares to a usual cello. The lowest note is like the empty C string on the cello. And of course it's made of steel. There are a couple of reasons why I choose this material. One is this is obviously the material our civilization is based on. We build weapons from it, we build tools from it, and why not building a musical instrument? The second is making instruments out of metal makes them incredibly slow, and that's what I prefer. There are some things to tell about slowness, but I will do that later. It is not supposed to be a instrument played as a solo instrument. It is it works best in combination with other musicians, or actually there are 4 instruments in use together. When, given this is the cello, then there's also a contrabass and a violin and a viola, and together we are, it's called Stahl Quartet, which means steel quartet, and we are playing throughout the whole music history, starting with very early stuff, Hildegard von Bingen, or and through all the history up to pop songs or contemporary stuff. And we like to combine that with other instruments, other ensembles. So that's for now. It's tuned chromatically, and as you can see, for every tone there is one rod with a different length. It's tuned from C to C again, and the C here is repeated on this side. So it has 4 octaves range, and as a quartet we have 6 octaves. So its design, it was not really free to decide how to make it or how it should look like. Everything follows a function. Also this long piece at the end, it's not supposed to hit somebody's head. It's just because this long part needs the resonances, lower resonances to transmit the deep tones to the plate, and the plate itself serves like a kind of a plate reverb, or it's the resonating unit. and it makes the sound as loud as it is. The handling is, you wouldn't expect that. It is easier than for a drummer, for instance. It's 4 parts, the plate, the 2 arms and the foot, and its weight is about 45 kilogram. I think, I don't know how it's translated to pounds, but you can carry it yourself. It fits in a car, and I can travel around with, and it takes 10 minutes to make it working. There was another thing I wanted to say about slowness. Yeah. It sounds maybe easy to just slow music down, but something special happens to our perception of music. Maybe you already know. It's not really new to the most of you, but the slower a sound, the less important is the series of notes, and sound itself becomes the material to work with when making music, and that's what I like. Just as an example, and our perception will follow and will open something very unexpected. For instance, you say the word "you." The word "you" is just one unit, and you can say "you," and then you can compare it with what you have written before. Maybe they are 3 characters. And then you can say you, and the spectrum becomes a series of following notes. And I wanted to have an instrument which makes the bridge between let's say playing music in terms of melodies or voices, and this kind of spectral listening. And you can do it yourself. Everyone can do that. It's just a matter of speed. So the first song I want to play for you is written by Björk, and I try to avoid amplification. again? Yeah. So I have to find some words. This is just one of a series of different music sculptures or instruments I made over the years. But it is, to me, it's the most important and the most flexible because it has this range. The others are much more focused on sound, and they have, for instance, just 3 notes or 3 tones to play with, but more possibilities to alter the sound. This principle is used as well in a group of 8 instruments. Each of them has only 3 tones, but it's played by 8 people. So we can say one instrument is divided in 8 parts and is played by 8 people. This is used for instance, for hyperactive childs. And it's hard to explain. When you play this, or sometimes even it's enough to listen to it, then you get slow in a way. And it helps people to get focused on what they do. And you get a physical response. If you stand here, you feel the vibrations on the button, you feel it in your hands. And so you get more involved in the whole process of how the sound comes to life. So this is, to me, an interesting approach to work with people who are not used to music or to sound. And it helps to develop this kind of listening. Once you get it, once you try to listen to overtones, you can go out and you will listen to it in every steady sound or noise. And it seems to be simple. It shows a principle which is quite old: 1 instrument, 1 singer, and that's it. But this instrument reflects all the technological approach we have in our culture. It wouldn't have been possible to do this instrument, let's say, 50 years ago. There's a selection going on for instruments, mainly through if it's useful in orchestras. Our time only makes it possible to use those strange things. So now I'm done. Before I talk too much, it's your turn. Just ask what you want to know, if you want something to know.
Before you said you had a quartet and that you were marching through the history of music. Were you using 4 of these instruments to march
right.
through?
It's this type. They look the same. They have just different rods.
But you can perform them. You can perform traditional repertoire with that instrument.
Just in slow motion. Yeah,
oh, in slow motion.
We can play everything, but we do it in slow motion, and it is somehow you put music under a microscope. You will lose a bit the whole thing, but you get more in detail, and you. This is so amazing to have 2 chords, just one after another.
Yes, I'm with you on that. Slowly, slowly, yeah. When I, with electronic music, I took things and I slowed them down, half speed, because humans traditionally don't play well at slow speeds. This instrument adapts itself to a physical interface that allows you to play slowly because you're using your whole body, it seems. Yeah.
This is kind of the movement I have to do. And the other thing is there is a kind of resistance in the rod, and you have to follow if you want to have a useful tone. Mm-hmm. And it makes the whole way you use your body slower than usually.
Yeah, that reminds me of Music for a Long Thin Wire, where you bow it by walking along, and
Alan Fullman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, is there a bigger version of this that you
There is a bigger version, yeah, but it is, this is the size you can travel with,
Gig
and you
with,
can play comfortable.
Right.
So
do you view that this instrument should be sung with, in addition to bowed? You do, certainly, but is that your vision? Is the instrument part you as well? Your voice?
Maybe I didn't get the point.
I see before me an instrument that suggests it should be bowed, and I was surprised and extremely delighted when I heard you singing with it as well. And so most cellists don't start fiddling away and then singing along. Many do, but that's not traditionally the role. So do you view your voice as part of this instrument? Or
in
just
this case, yes.
Okay.
I used my voice like an instrument, not as a singer, and that it blends. It was just, I couldn't predict that. But it was kind of, how to say, it comes from the same source. Yeah. It is slowness, and singing overtones is, first of all, also possible if you slow down voice. With a, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, we are out of time. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe another round of applause for a great first day for everyone in the room. About what's happening now. Just like other sessions, we have about 20 minutes that everyone is welcome to go around, touch, ask. We have some questions that maybe were not asked. Then it's on your time for all the competitors. The students will be meeting in the dress room over there. The judges will go to dinner and will come back around 7. So please be here around 7. There will be mostly presentations, some demos, Q&A. You can ask judges about what they think in general about musical instruments, but they will definitely talk about their own experience and show their own inventions. So that's the plan for today. Go ahead, experiment with the instrument, and please be back at 7.